I used to believe that love, once promised, carried weight. We talked about futures the way people do when they're sure, casual but confident, as if nothing could interrupt the direction we were moving in. He knew my routines, my fears, the way I liked my coffee. I trusted him in the quiet, ordinary ways that don't feel dramatic until they're broken. That trust is what made everything that followed hurt more than I was prepared for. The change didn't happen loudly. It started with distance that felt accidental, then excuses that didn't quite add up. His phone never left his hand. Plans were cancelled last minute. When I asked, he said I was overthinking. I wanted to believe him because believing him was easier than admitting something was wrong. The truth arrived without ceremony, messages I wasn't meant to see, affection he was giving someone else while still coming home to me. When I confronted him, he didn't deny the affair. He minimized it, blamed stress, blamed timing, blamed me for noticing. We separated shortly after. I was still trying to process the betrayal when my body forced me to pay attention. The nausea wouldn't stop. The exhaustion felt different. I took a test alone in my bathroom, staring at the result long enough to convince myself it might disappear if I waited. It didn't. When the doctor confirmed it wasn't just one baby but two, I laughed and cried at the same time. Twins. A word that should have sounded like joy, but landed like gravity. I told him because it felt like the responsible thing to do. His reaction was immediate and cold. He said the timing didn't make sense. He said I was lying. Then he said something worse, that even if I was pregnant, they couldn't be his. He accused me of trying to trap him, of making up a story because he'd moved on. The woman he cheated with was suddenly his shield, proof that he had a new life and no space for mine. I tried reason, dates, facts, reminders of the months we were still together. He shut it all down. He said he wanted nothing to do with the pregnancy and blocked my number before I could finish explaining. Within days, I heard from friends that he was telling people the same story, that I was unstable, that the twins were a lie, that he was being harassed by an ex who couldn't let go. I sat with that reality alone. Not just the fear of raising two children on my own, but the humiliation of being publicly denied. He didn't just walk away, he erased us before we even existed. That was the moment I understood this wasn't only about infidelity. It was about responsibility, and his refusal to take it. As I placed my hands over my stomach that night, I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't beg him to believe me, but I also wouldn't let the truth disappear just because he said it didn't exist. The twins were born into a silence he chose. There were no messages, no calls, no questions about their health or names. I learned quickly how heavy responsibility feels when it's carried alone. Nights blurred into mornings, and exhaustion became a constant companion. I measured time in feedings and cries, learning how to function without sleep because there was no one else to hand them to. Love kept me standing, but it didn't make things easy. Money was always tight. I returned to work sooner than my body was ready because survival didn't wait for healing. Childcare costs swallowed most of what I earned, and every unexpected expense felt like a threat. Still, I refused to let resentment leak into how I raised them. They deserved warmth, not bitterness. I told myself that being present mattered more than being perfect. I reached out to him more than once, not to beg for a relationship, but to ask for acknowledgement. Each attempt was met with silence or dismissal. When he did respond, it was brief and cruel. He repeated the same line, that the twins weren't his and never would be. Eventually, he stopped responding altogether. The door wasn't just closed, it was locked. What hurt almost as much as his absence was how easily he controlled the narrative. Friends we once shared began to pull away. I heard whispers that I was unstable, that I'd invented the pregnancy to punish him for leaving. He told people he'd been harassed, that he'd escaped a manipulative situation. The truth didn't spread as fast as the lie, and I didn't have the energy to chase it. As the twins grew, their questions started. Simple ones at first, innocent and unassuming. Where is our dad? Why doesn't he come like other parents do? I answered carefully, never speaking badly of him, even when every part of me wanted to. I told them he wasn't around, that families come in different shapes. It was the truth, but not the whole one. Privately, the anger simmered. Not because he'd left me, but because he erased them. Denial became his way of escaping consequence, and for years, it worked. He built a new life while we scraped by. Birthdays passed without his name on a single card. Holidays came and went with no acknowledgement. Time didn't soften the injustice, it sharpened it. Somewhere along the way, survival turned into clarity. I stopped hoping he would suddenly do the right thing. Instead, I started keeping records. Messages, dates, proof, not out of revenge, but necessity. The twins deserved more than my word. They deserved truth that couldn't be talked over or dismissed. The final shift came quietly. One night, after putting them to bed, I realized I was done carrying this alone. Not emotionally, not legally, not silently. His denial had lasted years, but it didn't make it real. I wasn't asking anymore. I was preparing. Taking legal action felt like reopening a wound I had spent years learning how to live with. I didn't do it out of spite or anger. I did it because the twins were getting older, and silence was no longer protecting anyone. Filing the case meant putting everything on record: timelines, messages, medical reports. Each document carried a memory I had tried to bury, but I pushed through it because truth demanded consistency, not comfort. When he was notified, his reaction was exactly what I expected. He was confident, almost smug, as if the years of denial had hardened into certainty. He told anyone who would listen that I was wasting the court's time. He claimed I was obsessed, that this was another attempt to drag him into a life he never chose. Watching him double down on the lie was unsettling, but it also removed any remaining doubt. He wasn't confused. He was avoiding responsibility. The first court appearance was exhausting. Sitting across from someone who once promised me everything, now treating me like a stranger, was surreal. He avoided eye contact. His lawyer spoke for him, repeating the same narrative he had been telling for years. I said very little. I didn't need to convince anyone with emotion. Facts were enough. When the judge ordered a DNA test, the room felt heavy. That moment stripped away every excuse. There was no arguing with biology. Still, waiting for the results was harder than I expected. At night, doubt crept in, not about the truth, but about how much damage denial had already done. I worried about how the outcome would affect the twins, regardless of the answer. I reminded myself that clarity was better than uncertainty, even if it came late. The day the results arrived, everything slowed down. Papers were handed over. The judge read silently. I watched his face, searching for any sign of what was coming. When the confirmation was stated out loud, it was brief and factual. He was the biological father of both children. No drama, no emphasis, just truth, finally given weight. The shift in the room was immediate. His confidence evaporated. For the first time, he looked unprepared. He stared at the table, jaw tight, as if refusing to look up might undo what had just been said. His lawyer asked for a moment. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. Years of denial collapsed in a few sentences. I felt something unexpected: relief, not victory. There was no satisfaction in watching someone cornered by their own lies. What mattered was that the truth no longer depended on my voice alone. It existed on paper, recognized and undeniable. As the judge acknowledged the results and moved forward, I realized this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. He could deny me for years, but he couldn't deny science, and he couldn't deny the consequences that were about to follow. The ruling that followed was direct and unemotional, exactly as it should have been. Paternity was established, and with it came responsibility he could no longer dodge. Child support was ordered, not as punishment, but as obligation. For the first time, his name was legally connected to the twins in a way that couldn't be rewritten or explained away. What years of denial had avoided in conversation was now fixed in record. Afterward, he tried to speak to me. Not with the confidence he once had, but with hesitation, as if choosing words carefully might soften what had already happened. He said he was shocked. He said he needed time. He said he never thought it would go this far. I listened without interrupting, not because I owed him that courtesy, but because it was clear he needed to hear himself. When he finished, I told him the truth simply. It had gone this far the moment he chose denial over responsibility. Everything after that was a consequence, not a surprise. I didn't ask for an apology, and I didn't accept the half-formed one he offered anyway. Regret spoken after proof carries less weight than accountability shown before it's forced. I wasn't interested in repairing what had already collapsed. My focus was forward, where the twins were waiting, unaware of how much effort it had taken just to secure what should have been automatic. The change in my life wasn't dramatic, but it was meaningful. Financial stability eased pressures I had carried quietly for years. More importantly, certainty replaced doubt. When the twins asked about their father, I no longer had to navigate around a lie that wasn't mine. I told them the truth in terms they could understand, without anger, without blame. Their story belonged to them, not to his fear. What surprised me most was how little satisfaction I felt. There was no sense of revenge, no urge to revisit the past. Validation didn't arrive as a rush, it settled slowly, like something that had always been deserved but delayed. I had spent years being questioned, dismissed, and judged. Now, there was nothing left to prove. Looking back, I understand that infidelity wasn't the deepest betrayal. Denial was. Cheating broke trust between two adults, but denying children broke. The truth didn't change who I was. It clarified it. I wasn't the woman he claimed I